Well, Kendall, it is going to be a fun conversation. I'm excited to dig into your next chapter, mental health, all the things that you're doing and will be doing. So I'm pumped to have you on. Kendall, thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here to get to chat.
Oh, I'm looking forward to it. So tell me this just real quick. Where did your, health journey, fitness journey, can you kind of get me inside of where that all started for you?
Oh, totally. I mean, I grew up as a competitive gymnast. So it all began really with loving that sport and I think being drawn to it. I didn't realize it at the time, but this need for perfectionism, which then I realized about 10 years old was really OCD, but the beginning stages of it. And I fell in love with gymnastics and I fell in love with movement. And then that turned to dance and cheer. And then I had a stint as a kid actor. And I think going through all of these
Wow.
different high stress, high pressure environments in college, it really clicked for me that I needed to move my body for myself. And that was going to be my way through my mental health journey. And so I had a great mentor who was a film director who actually had a boxing gym on the west side of California. And he was like, "You got a lot going on," which was a very polite way of saying, "I don't know what the hell is wrong with you." And he invited me to that
Mhm.
gym, and I absolutely fell head over heels in love with the sport. And I trained 3 times a week, and he never charged me once. So I owe a great deal
Wow.
to him for supporting my mental health
Wow.
through movement and through boxing.
It's interesting because I've never really, I was not a cheerleader, but when you say that, right, this perfectionist
Hmm.
mindset, I bet, and this
Yeah.
expectation of that, I bet that is really an interesting byproduct, I would imagine, of that of that sport. And then and then fast forward right to the opportunity with Peloton,
Yeah.
which you've stepped away from now. But just tell me quickly, how did you step into that Peloton opportunity?
Yeah.
There's been so many we've had Ali Love on, we've had Robin Arzon, Cody
You
Rigsby,
got the whole
and
crew.
everybody's got their own sort of, yeah, I mean, right. He's a little, he's wide open. Tell me a
Yeah.
little bit about, I mean, everybody's journey to get there's a little different. What was yours?
Yes, no, it is. It's what's so fascinating about everybody at Peloton. Their route to get there was so singular to who they were. But mine was very interesting. So because of my mentor, who's that film director that helped support me through falling in love with boxing, my trainer actually was opening a boxing fitness studio in West Hollywood. And at the time, I was working in tech and I pivoted my career completely. It was a very difficult work environment that I was in. It was a year
Mm,
before Me Too, and I almost wish it was a year
wow.
after. But really had to kind of retool life a bit after that and had this wake up call. And so I was broke and living at home with my parents, and I just wanted to cover my bills and my car payment. And I was such a shell of myself. And so my boxing trainer was opening a boxing fitness studio in West Hollywood. He's like, "Do you want to be a teacher?" I'm like, "Sure, I need money." So I trained. I fell in love with teaching. On my fourth class, the owners of a company called Rumble Boxing, came and took my
Mm-hmm.
class. I was offered a job that evening to open their Los Angeles studio as their founding trainer. I lived in New York for a little while, training up, fell in love with New York City. And then after a year and a half of being at Rumble in Southern California, founding that studio, Cody Rigsby, who you just spoke with, slid into my DMs and was
Yeah.
like, "Do you want to audition for Peloton?" And I was like, "Well, two things. I want to move to New York. I had a gut instinct. I needed to be in the city.
Got it.
And I
Okay.
also was like, I'm ready to lean into this fitness journey and empower people more." And so 2 weeks later, I was auditioning. A week later, I got the job. He called me and told me, "Can you move in the next weekend?" And I pretty much did. And that was 5.5 years ago.
Oh my gosh. And
You
you've
know,
been putting up with Cody Rigsby for that long? Good Lord.
it's
No,
a
he
trip.
is such a blast. He
Uh-huh.
is a trip. So fun. And, as of late, you've really opened up about
Hmm.
mental health awareness. Can you share a little about your own journey in that space? And I know it's something that you're deeply passionate about
Hmm.
in service of helping others step into and through what is such a difficult experience, I would imagine. But can you sort of talk about your journey a bit because I know it's a lot.
Oh, most definitely. Yeah, I think what's beautiful about being at this stage in my life and having gone through such a dark chapter is that conversation is now one of my most favorite things to do, which is ironic because Kendall a decade ago would have never spoken about any of these things. In fact, it's really interesting the timing that we're talking. It'll be an exact decade next week from the absolute worst night of my life. I was in a very dark place mentally my senior year of college. I was a USC cheerleader. I was in their very challenging competitive film program, had everything on the surface. And behind the scenes and behind the mask that I put on, I was just a shell of myself and was really struggling with depression and anxiety. Was afraid to tell anybody that I wasn't well. I was afraid of putting that pressure on somebody else, was trying to shoulder the burden myself. And my terrible night just before Thanksgiving, my senior year of college, junior, going into senior year of college, I was very, very close to taking my own life and almost went through with it. Saw just before my phone light up. And I had my phone on silent, and it was about 15, 16 missed calls from my mom. And I had this flash of kind of like what would become of my family, what would kind of be the after if I followed through, and then saw the phone and picked it up. And she's like, "What's wrong?" And I was like, "Can you just come pick me up?" So mother's instincts are very, very real. I think familial instinct is very real. And the next few months are really hazy. I had incredible professors at USC. My grades were so high that they were like, "She's fine. We'll pass her. Like, we don't need to give her a final. Everything's been turned in. Everything's fine." But I kind of blacked out. I don't remember a lot of the next 3 months. Really was struggling to get out of bed, just do the basics. And I remember my dad coming up to my room and really pleading with me because they were at a point, my parents were like, "All right, if Kendall can't get to the space where she's able to, like," I wasn't showering, I wasn't eating, I was really struggling. And, they were talking about putting me in inpatient, which is a wonderful program. There's nothing against it. But for me, I was so afraid of not graduating on time. That was my big weakness or fear. And remember my dad came out to my room and he said, "Okay, kiddo," he's like, "What do we always say in this family?" And he looked at me and he goes, "This can knock you down, but you have to choose to not let this knock you out. This can never knock you out." And I saw the pleading in my dad's eyes and in what I was doing to my family. And that was the game changer. For me, it wasn't about taking care of myself. At that point, I hadn't had that self-love or self-worth to be able to make that choice. But I knew I loved my family and I knew I loved the people around me, and that's what I needed to do for them. And so fast forward to now what has been my phrase from the time I was teaching at Rumble. I'd close classes with this to when I went through that tough chapter, my first, professional job. It was always my dad's motto: "They can knock you down, but they can never knock you out." And now it's become kind of a movement, which is beautiful. So there's a whole community of people.
Awesome.
That's what NKO stands for, Never Knocked Out. And now it's become this, actually a few months ago, I was able to launch my own Never Knocked Out fund. So it is a mental health fund, a 401(c) in alignment with Social Impact Fund, where we raise money in support to programs for mental health awareness and support communities.
I mean, and just to sort of paint this picture a little bit more deeply, I mean, I've heard you say that you were standing on the top of a building. Yes. In this moment. I mean, you were right there with your toes on I mean, it's not like, hey, maybe you were there in that moment, and your mom, what a blessing and what incredible parents. Gosh, I mean, what a role they've both played. And it's so interesting because I always have believed that our purpose is about others at the most fundamental level. And what's so interesting to hear you say is that what helped you step out of that was thinking about the impact that would have on the people that you love so much. And then, in fact, they were there for you in that moment. And it's such a powerful thing, because I think when we find ourselves in those moments, I would imagine maybe, and that obviously is a remarkably enormous moment, but it's so interesting that you went to others in that moment. And that, in fact, is what on so many levels pulled you out. Had you found that to be the case, or have you, as you've moved forward into other maybe less prolific moments in your life, where that purpose of the people that you care deeply about has helped you step into the next right choice, if you will?
You absolutely nailed that on the head completely. I think when speaking about purpose or speaking about being able to take action, it's so hard for us to have, I think, at any stage of the game, enough self-love and self-care that we do things for ourselves. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing either. But the power of community, the power of knowing the fact that there are others that rely on you. It's that team mentality as well, right? I think that's why team sports are so important,
Sure.
especially for kids
Yeah.
developmentally, because you have to understand that you're not the only player in the game, that your decisions affect those around you. And I think it not only brings about a level of accountability, but it also can be a lifeline in a moment when you're mentally so isolated. And so, even, pivoting in a different way in my choice to recently leave Peloton, I absolutely loved my job. I loved what I got to do all the time. I do miss it dearly. There'll be something coming soon in the future where I'll be able to partake in that again. But it was at a point where I knew I could serve this community. I felt deeply I could serve that community better in another deeper way and in a more one-to-one way. And that was something I really felt called to do. And so I do believe that I think having those deep ties with those around you be your lifeline and be the motivator. It really does root into purpose. Because for me, I think purpose is always service driven. It's based off of how we're
Yep.
providing
Yep.
to others. And
Sure.
it's not about who we are ourselves to project outward. It's how we connect outward more so.
Tell me this. I mean, you're out in the world. I mean, you have millions of followers. You have an incredible community, certainly during your time at Peloton. And it sounds like you've been in sort of that place where you've had a lot of people looking at you, watching you for a long time, from the sidelines of USC to acting to. And yet inside of your head and heart, you're carrying this heavy, heavy load. How did you, because I think we live in a world where now these things are being talked about more, and now you're hearing, D1 football coaches talk about love and all
Yeah.
these things and mental health that never.
It never
Tell
happened.
me a little bit about how did you navigate, because there's probably there's definitely people in the world, right, who feel a level of visibility. Maybe they're a leader inside of an organization or a CEO of a company, or they're in fact truly out there in a public way like you are, but yet are caring so much. What was your day-to-day process relative to stepping into what was a life that requires an enormous amount of energy and an enormous amount of positive energy
Oh.
with the whole world watching? I mean, get me inside of what your tactics and tools were to do that until you sort of are where you are now, which is totally open and talking about this. But I'm just curious.
No, that's a wonderful question. So much of it was it was realizing that the internal battle that I was going through, I was not being honest. And I think growing up in Los Angeles, growing up in the film industry, so much of my existence was focused on masking. Even gymnastics, it's like point your toes, just keep moving, just keep going, never let them see you sweat. And that high pressure, high visibility, look, it can build an incredible athlete, it can build an incredible speaker. I think there's part of us we do need that. But it became such a weight because I recognized, especially with Peloton, when I was going through pandemic, as we all were, was in a 500 square foot apartment, which was amazing. This was dream. I was broke when I got my Peloton
That's
job.
tight.
Oh, it was tight. I got a dog. It was real cold. I'm a
Ooh.
California girl. It would talk about, like, we all went through it,
Right.
right? Nobody came out of that
Sure.
unscathed. And
Totally.
I had this green velvet couch that was on a vision board that I had a year before. And I said, just the first thing I'm going to do when I can afford an apartment in my own place is I'm going to get a damn green velvet couch. And that was the first thing I bought, which was amazing. So
Oh,
it was
wow.
too
That's
big, but
killer.
I pushed it against a
Right.
wall, kind of by my bed, whatever.
Right.
And I remember I was sitting on this couch and this internal battle and struggle was coming up because at that point I was 6 months into my time at Peloton. And I was still playing the front. I was still playing the mask, right? I was like, who's the character they want me to be? And how do I be the best at that and people please that way? And then I recognized we're all struggling right now. The world isn't shut down. People are going internal for the first time for some of them in their lives. I can't continue to keep up. It just felt like a lie. So going on Instagram Live and I remember I just out of the blue just went on live and said it. I was like, I have anxiety and depression and we're going to talk about it.
Oh, wow.
And the
Right.
release, though, the release of the
Yeah,
vulnerability of
was it?
that,
Oh, I bet it was epic.
it was so beautiful because I think I was so tired of doing the internal self judgment that I was like, you know what? No one could be worse to me than myself at this point. So whatever feedback I'm going to get, I'm probably ready for it. I feel like I beat myself up so much internally that I was ready to hear it from the external. So some of the tactics, after I was opening up about that and recognizing there was value there, I still struggle with this. Like gratitude journaling. Thank you to my therapists that have gotten me through everything. Gratitude first thing in the morning, game changing, like so important to my day to day. I have a sand timer that's 3 minutes. So if if my intrusive thoughts and my depressive thoughts are really loud certain days, I learned this as a kid from my OCD treatment. I turn over the sand timer and I'm allowed to, and I force myself to think all of the worst things, give space to those awful thoughts for 3 minutes.
Okay.
3 minutes is a long time to commit to that.
Yeah.
And it was kind of amazing.
So whatever the negative is, you just
I go straight
step into it
head first.
Wow. Okay. This is interesting. And
then after those 3 minutes, one, you recognize how hard it is to stay in that place for a straight 3 minutes, right? We have these little voices in our head that come up very loudly and we push them under the rug. When you give them their own space, you kind of recognize they're not as big of the monsters as you realize, because your logical brain starts to come in and try to stop you from doing that, which is interesting.
Sure.
So you reframe that battle, and then later on in the day, if those thoughts come back up again, what do? You tell yourself, you're like, no, we already took our time with that. That had its space. That had its time. We're done with that for today. We did it today. And it helps take power back and build a new neural pathway to where I have more choice. I have a bit of a safety or an e-brake before I start careening down the intrusive thought patterns and those spirals,
Yep. That's interesting. And so it's like, go there, give it everything it's got, let it have its power, but then pull back. It's so interesting. I always think, because you're right. I mean, I think I read a stat. I recently released a book and we talk about there's 70,000 automatic thoughts that we have in our head a day. Yeah. Which is an enormous amount of thoughts, right? And so you think if we don't automatically reset them, they'll just keep clipping away. And I think, often, sadly, right, often in this world that we live in, right, that is so, I think, overly achievement focused, visible, sort of that visual sort of focus of sort of being perfect relative to, you take 1,000 pictures and then you post whatever.
And edit and all that.
But it keeps us stuck, right? And so it's like, how do we take that inner critic and turn it into an inner coach, and talk to ourselves like a great coach would, right? I was talking to a friend the other day and I said, imagine, right, like if a 1-year-old pulled themselves up on a table to try to walk and they fell. Like, what would you say to that 1-year-old? You'd be like, you got this, right? Like, come on, like, good girl, like, good boy, pull up. Yeah. And it's sort of, how do we take that visual in our own heads so that we can tell ourselves that to shift? But it's tough, right? Because there's so many automatic. When so you go to that place for 3 minutes, you give it the thought, what happens in 2 hours when one of those trickles back in? How do you reframe a new script for yourself? Yep. How do you reinforce it and keep it visible throughout your day so that you don't default back into that, or you don't go, okay, I'm going to give it another 3 minutes and another 3 minutes, because we certainly don't want to take
back into it. Yeah. Part of it's that, one, it's practicing discipline in other areas of my life. I mean, anybody, any type of athlete, anybody within sports, I think understands why sports are so important because of the discipline. Because 2/3 of the time you're not really doing too hot. 1/3 you're doing okay. The other third you suck. So you get used to kind of, it reframes the expectations a bit. But still, right? When you're a high performance and high achievement individual who also then has spotlight and pressures and all these other things, how do you manage that? So let's say that thought comes back up, right? I've already done my 3-minute sand timer. What's been helpful is disassociating myself from those thoughts. An incredible therapist I've worked with, she had me write down what those thoughts were. And she said, who is saying this? I was like, well, what do you mean I'm saying it? And she goes, well, hold on. Are you saying that? Would you say that to other people? Is that how you coach people in your classes? Is that how you would talk to somebody on the street? And it it makes me emotional thinking about, because it's also, I wouldn't talk to my younger self that way. I would never speak to someone as poorly as I speak to myself in my head. So the realization was, if I don't put that out into the world, is that truly me? Or is that just some part of my brain that's trying to protect something that it doesn't know where to put that energy and reframing that. So I have the voice in my head, and no offense, I love the name Tina, Tina Turner, bless her, icon. But the voice in my head is named Tina. And whenever that voice comes back up, I'm like, Tina, my girl, not now. We did it. I spent time with you today. We're good. It's kind of understanding that we all kind of have an internal monster. We all have the Dr. Jekyll Hyde, and it's okay. But you can't let that other voice, you can't mistake that other voice for being your true soul's voice, because I think there's a big difference. And I had an acting coach, one more great metaphor. Oh, he also passed on in the last decade. He was a riot. Great guy. Wanted to be a cowboy. Like, worked with Kevin Costner for like 30 years. Great guy. Didn't have a cell phone. He had to fax him. But Richard was,
man.
He was the best. He was such a good dude. He wore Ralph Lauren head to toe. He was just a riot. So Richard was such a lovely man. And I remember he said, he looked me dead in the eye. This is before I'd really recognized my mental health challenges. This was probably when I was 16 or 17 in an acting class. And he said, Kendall, the longest distance you're going to have to travel is about 8 or 10 inches. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, where's this going? I'm like, hold on.
I want to go to New York, dude. And we're in California right now. What are you talking about?
I got a lot to travel. And he said, it is a distance from getting here, which he was pointing to my head. And he said to here, pointing to like your soul, your solar plexus, your true self. And he said, when you can learn to walk that walk and travel that distance, he said, you will be free. And that just exploded me, because I was like, wow, I spend so much of my life determining every step and overthinking every direction. I think a lot of us do in our brains, when really we know what we need to do. There is an internal instinct. There's that instinct when you're in flow state, when you're in your sport or giving a keynote or just doing what you're purposed to do. You don't even think, you just flow. And that's from the soul. That's not from the brain, you know?
Right. Yes. Yes. That's good stuff. I mean, I think that's really cool. The Tina sort of metaphor, and the you've had your time, Tina, go away, right? Like, we're done for the day or for the week
Time
or
out,
for whatever.
Tina.
Yeah, I think it's so cool.
Yeah, she's in the
So I want to dig into. Yeah, totally right, exactly. Yeah. So I want to dig into your next chapter. I mean, this is really cool, really exciting, and I mean, you walk away from a dream job that the world views as a dream job, and I got to tell you, Kendall, for me, that's so interesting, because I was a sports agent for almost 20 years and then left to start speaking and writing. And the world was like, what are you doing? Right? You have this quote unquote dream job, and you're going to go sort of roll the dice over here and see. But to your point, we feel called to live into what we believe we're uniquely positioned to do.
Amen.
And that was, despite the world's sort of take on that, if you will, yours at a much higher level, of course. But you got to follow your heart, right? Like, you've got to follow your heart. And I think when you do that and close a gap in the market at some level from a practical perspective, we can make a really big impact. And so how has it been? I mean, you hit eject, right, from this this incredible brand, platform, et cetera. How's it been going, and what's next? I mean, I know you got to be a little bit careful here, but talk to me, girl. I'm excited.
Yeah. So you spoke exactly to it. You get to that point where it's not from a lack of being grateful when you know it's time to move on, but there is this nudging. I'm going to call it like a nudging and a knowing. And where I recognized, I was like, oh, it might be time, was that some of my mental health habits, like when I had OCD, I'd be very weird about being barefoot. I had certain rituals. I started falling back into those. I started feeling a little bit contained by my life in New York. I wasn't really thriving. I loved going to classes, and I loved doing the meet and greets after and talking to people. But I felt like the walls were kind of getting in a little tight, like they were closing, because I felt like I had truly gotten to the point, like it's like a hermit crab, right? They have to swap shells throughout their life cycle so that they're able to continue growing. If they stay in that shell, they will literally, their bodies will grow so big they'll suffocate in the shell and die. And now, was I going to die at Peloton? No. But I did feel the compression. And I know that compression well from other areas of my life. And, for me, like with my faith, there was a lot of prayer involved. And I'm like, make it really abundantly clear. I'm like, I can't do a gray
Right.
area. So when we're going through these conversations and all that, make it so clear that I don't have to make a decision, that I know it was your decision. And let me tell you,
Right.
it was so abundantly clear. And I remember it was April. We announced everything about June, and April, that day that conversation was had, and I felt such peace, which was for me the
Awesome.
marker. Knowing that
Right.
outcome, I was like, wow, I should feel so scared. I was scared of what could be. Am I
Mm-hmm.
really ready for this? And I just felt peace. I felt like just calm. And I was like, okay, it's time. It is time. He was right. It's time. So, yeah, now I left and everyone's constantly, what are you doing? What's next? Which I completely get. There's, you were a sports agent. There's contracts involved. So there's certain things I can't do
Right.
quite yet, which is
Yep.
totally
Yep.
fine and totally standard. And I completely
Sure.
understand that. And anyway, so the first thing that I did was I knew I wanted to lean into the community as much as possible. I knew if I couldn't be
Mm-hmm.
teaching immediately, I want to build those bridges, those connections. I want to speak, I want to write, I want to
Yeah.
create, but I have to make my own day now, right? So thankfully, I have
Mm-hmm.
wonderful partners. Like I work with Lululemon, I'm a global ambassador for them. We had this great World Mental Health Day campaign. They knew I was going to be building my fund. They're like, how can we be supportive and assistive? So we've already partnered with that. So within six
Cool.
weeks, I launched a podcast, I launched a newsletter, and within 2 months, I launched the NKO Fund. I'll be
Wow.
announcing something very soon in January, but it's in the vein of like a live stream network for my community, which I'm
Oh, let's
very excited.
go.
hmm
Okay.
So we can still
That
have
is
those weekly
cool.
connections. And then this upcoming summer will be something very big. And that's the one I can't really get into too much detail on. So we're phasing up
Do
this.
you need it? You need an agent to jump in there and get those numbers up for you a little bit there, girl? No, I'm just kidding.
Honestly, I have
For the
great
next
people.
one.
I am always here for advice, feedback, and to bring somebody else in. If there's one thing I've learned from the smartest people that I've gotten to meet and be around is that they always surround themselves with people that are smarter than them. Like I am fine to
Yeah.
know what I don't know, and I'm good with that. I
Yep.
know what I'm good at,
Yep.
and I know what I'm not, and
Amen.
that's fine.
Amen. I
hmm
know, dude. I started with my husband who's smarter than me,
hmm
and now my entire team. I agree with you. I mean,
Amen.
you
I'm
want to be
dating a
around
great man.
and
He's the
people
same
that
way.
are, amen. And you want people too that aren't afraid to post you up, right?
And
Because you are in a position where nobody tells you the truth. I mean, everybody. I remember once
yeah.
taking one of my baseball players to an appearance, and he gets out of the car, and he had on the ugliest sweater you've ever seen in your entire life. And I looked at him, and he was a big deal, right? Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
And I said, "Did your wife let you out of the house in that sweater?" And he goes, "Yeah, she said it looked great." And I'm like, "She's even lying to you, right?" Like,
Oh.
I'm like, "No, dude." Tell me a little bit about how long did you feel the way you felt about stepping away from Peloton? How long did it take you to muster up I mean, obviously you're a woman of faith and you were creating sort of a foundation of prayer to allow that to bubble up inside of you and create that clarity. How long did you feel that way? And then what were some of the emotions that you went through and stepping into the discomfort of that is real?
Oh
But
yeah.
it's in
Yeah, no,
fact creating growth for you. But kind of get me inside of that a little bit.
Oh, completely. That's a wonderful question. No one's ever actually asked that because I think the moment before that decision is actually one of the most difficult ones because you're weighing every option. I know I started to feel that compression, and it was because of honest feedback from my family, again, from my mom.
Awesome. Yep.
I was really getting just easily irritated, like little things. I just the things that would bring me joy were not bringing me joy in the same way. I had felt to this point, I was like, I'm so grateful for New York, but I just felt like I never felt at home there. I never felt like I could fully put my feet down and relax when I got home. I always felt like I had to do more and be more. And I started feeling that same pressure, that mask that I had worked so hard to take off. I started
Interesting.
feeling like I
Right.
had to put it back on again. And
Oh,
yeah, there were conversations
yeah.
and just in, cultural shifts in different areas of my life where I was just like, wow, I'm being separated from whatever I'm
Interesting.
currently doing. And
Sure.
I kind of felt, when you have like a tear in like a hem or a fabric and it just slowly starts to rip like
Oh, yeah.
thread by thread. That's kind of how the
Yes.
time felt. So I'd say about a
Sure.
year leading up to probably, so let's see, I left We started contract negotiations, renegotiations January 24. So I'd say probably about 8 months before I started really feeling this feeling in 23. Like,
Wow.
and it was
Okay.
slow going, but I was like, no, it's fine. Maybe you're going through this, maybe you're going through that. And I really started leaning on my faith a lot more, which was really interesting. You know, I grew
Mm-hmm.
up Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
I have my own I qualms with the Catholic Church. I was connected when I got confirmed. I went to an incredible church in Studio City that I still go back to whenever
Mm-hmm.
I'm in Los Angeles. It's been a beautiful home base for
Mm-hmm.
me. And then,
Sure.
you know, I think everyone kind of goes through different chapters with their faith. And so for me, I really started leaning on a lot more that the last year and a half, 2 years. And like, it was the first time I'd wake up in the morning and crack open my Bible and be like, okay, what actually is this? Like, let me actually
Right.
read it, not people's perceptions of
Yeah.
it. Like,
Sure. Yeah.
I'm a pretty darn good reader. Like, let me just decide for
Right.
myself. And in kind of
Mm.
that practice, I was noticing the way that I was going through the world or my irritation with things. And I felt very, in a good way, called out. I was like, oh, Kendall, like, you got to step this up. Like, oh, here's
Wow.
feedback here. Here's, you know, forgiveness is a big one.
Yeah.
Letting people
Yeah.
show up in the
Mm.
world as they are, not sending back what they send to you, all of it. And so
Mm. Mm-hmm.
all of those little pieces started to come together. And then come January with this contract renegotiation process, I really thought I was like, okay, I'll be at Peloton for one more year. I really thought I was going to make a year
Mm-hmm.
happen. And then in what they wanted, in what I wanted, in what how they saw the future, how I saw the future, they just became so glaringly different. And I remember I was
Mm.
speaking to my entertainment lawyer, who she is awesome. She is such
Uh-huh.
a great,
Well, you
incredible woman.
started with she, so I'm already kind of like,
Oh,
that's
amen.
solid. Dig
The
it.
majority of my
Dig it.
team is women. Yep. I made some
Yeah.
changes
Oh, yeah, girl.
and got a pretty much all women team at William Morris.
Yeah.
My agent Sloan Logue is amazing. She is a
Yeah.
straight
That's
shooter. She
awesome.
will not lie to me. I've really kind of I had to restack the deck in 2023, and I
Yeah.
did.
Sure.
And then coming into
Sure.
this, it was just honest, truth teller, truth teller, truth teller, truth teller. And then the final
That's
thing was for me
great.
to accept it. And that was what it was. I was like, all right, I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to accept this. My biggest thing, though, which my fear, I was so worried, and it's still something I struggle with now, is letting people down, is letting down the community that I was able to
Yeah.
connect to. And
Mm-hmm.
having to be like, please hold, be patient. I'm building these things for us
Mm-hmm.
to. It felt like we're migrating from one land to another. And I'm like, I'm building us a house. It's just not ready yet. It's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
like
It's framed up.
contract
I got the
deal.
decorator locked in.
There's foundation
Right.
there. I just can't tell you what the foundation is, but it's there. And it's like,
Yeah.
oh. So I
Yeah.
think the guilt
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
probably the hardest thing. But what was beautiful was how the community really was so supportive without even knowing the full details, which is just such a testament to the
Sure.
kindness and to the empathy and to, I think, because we were both very vulnerable with each other for a really long time, it felt very pure
Mm-hmm.
to move.
Yeah. No, that. Well, and I would imagine when people see you be you and your true self
Mm-hmm.
and step into what you need to people are so kind at the core in their hearts, and they want you and or others to live fully, and so I'm not surprised, given your platform and authenticity around it, that support was there, that net was under you.
Mm-hmm.
Was there ever a kind of a know your value kind of moment,
Amen.
right, for you in
Very
your
much so.
life?
Mm-hmm. I think I
Tell me
had
about
spent
that.
so many years trying to be the value that someone perceived of me. So if
Mm,
it was, for example, if it was at one of my first jobs out of college at an incredible, very well-known tech startup, I wanted to be what they wanted me to be. I dyed my hair black. I tried to dress different. I tried to not wear makeup.
mm,
I was so good at shape shifting myself to fit other people's needs of what they would think would be valuable that I just got really
yeah,
exhausted of doing it. I got so tired.
sure.
And it was such a
Yeah,
disservice to who I was, being everyone else's
yeah,
version of me they wanted. I was like, I'm not your little paper doll. I'm not here to play dress up.
right,
You know, this isn't it.
right.
I didn't even like dolls as a
Sure.
kid. I thought my Barbies were going to come alive and in my sleep and like murder me. Like I had a weird, I'm not kidding. The only Barbie doll I liked was my Britney Spears one because I knew Britney was good. Anyway, that's a whole other like probably childhood
Well,
trauma.
you should have played with Smurfs like my tomboy self did, and then
Oh my
they
gosh.
come to life too when you're sleeping.
Of course, but Smurfs, they're benevolent. Like they're blue. They're gonna be
Yeah,
fine. It's not like Barbie that's like,
right, right.
"Ooh." But no,
Yeah.
and I do love, look, I mean, if anyone from Mattel is listening, I do love Barbies. I think they're amazing. I love what you've done with the rebrand.
Right,
But
right, right, right. Yeah,
anyway,
yeah, yeah.
but
Look at
yeah,
you, girl. You're a little worried about that endorsement that might be coming through from Mattel, maybe, huh?
I'm not
No,
gonna
I'm
lie. I'm
kidding.
like, it would be cool to have a Barbie has been doing really cool things with like
Let's
their
go, Kendall. Let's this be this is the moment. This is the
Mattel, hit
clip
me
right
up.
here. We're taking this. Yeah, we're going viral with that one.
We need an NKO
Well, I
for
mean,
Barbie. They'll see why soon enough.
there we go.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm in. I think we need to carry that sword, that torch, that Barbie to Mattel. Well,
Amen.
tell me this. What advice do you give to people? There's the stats around people that are inside of a career or a job that they don't love is staggering, right?
Yeah.
And it breaks my heart when you think about the amount of hours that people work in their life overall, and the amount of people that don't wake up every day, frustrated that it's Friday, maybe because they're crushing it that week, and miserable that it's Monday. That breaks my heart.
I agree.
What advice do you tell people who are, I mean, you're in this unbelievable opportunity and step away, which is hard, obviously. What advice do you tell people that are in a place where they don't love it, that it's not lighting them up, they don't think it's their purpose, they don't really even think it's making them a better version of themselves, personally or professionally? How do they step into the heart of the change that maybe they probably need to step into?
No, that's a great question. I think, look, either route is a choice. There is no safe bet. Actually, it's so funny you're saying this. I posted something on Instagram about this, about taking risks just last night.
Yeah.
And there is not a safe bet. A bet is a bet. It means you're putting your chips down and that's what you're investing in. And when you recognize that, when you can do that with your brain and how you choose to think, you're either betting on the negative thoughts or you're betting on the positive thoughts. It is very scary to step out and do something different. But at the same time, maybe this is delusional. I don't think so. I don't think there's been a better time in human history to be able to find other forms of income and more pathways to do what you're passionate about. Like my grandparents, my parents didn't have the opportunities that we have now.
Right.
You can start, a graphic design business on Canva and pull in, at least
Right,
5 figures,
totally.
6
Oh,
figures a month
totally.
pretty easy. So
Yep.
it's finding
Sure.
what the purpose is and understanding like you have one life. It's all going to be difficult no matter which way you look at it. Would you rather it be difficult and you enjoy it, or would you rather to stay essentially a cog in someone else's machine, putting on the mask to do the thing, and just to live at 80%? I don't believe in that. I'd rather live as fully as possible and explore what that looks like, and know, okay, no matter what happens, I've been through so much in my life, I'll find a way to land on my feet. And I think a lot of people are more resilient than they give themselves credit for. I think trusting
100%.
that.
Yes. Yep. No, I mean, and I couldn't agree with you more. And I think what's important to, at some level, consider is, I think there's people out there that are like, hey, listen, Kendall, Molly, sounds great, but I've got 2 kids. My wife's at home. I make $150,000 a year. We have this perfect little setup, whatever. I can't is the word that I sometimes hear from people. And I'm like, no, but you actually, you can.
Yes.
Right? Like, if you pull back and consider what's at risk to make a change and what's at risk if I don't. And we can't wait till we're 65 and mail it in and sort of spend
your health
30
is there.
years.
Yeah.
Correct. Right. So I think it's really pulling back and recognizing there actually is more inside of these circumstances that I think we give ourselves credit for, that we can control. And I think a lot of times we think, well, I can't do that, and here's 1,000 reasons why. But maybe there is, in fact, a way that you can. And how could maybe we get curious about what that could look like, which it sounds like you certainly did. And we all have access to curiosity, right?
Oh,
It's
totally.
something that we can all tap into and
And
create
you have-
choices for ourselves.
Yeah. And you have knowledge and data, right? So let's say to that, you have 2 kids, you're making 150 grand a year, you have a good living, you have the family on your back. Okay. So I remember I did this early on when I was at Rumble, and I just wanted to try to make $80,000 a year. I just wanted to be like, if I can make 80, I can pay my bills, I can do this. So I literally took 80,000 and I said, all right, So let me add a little bit, or, not take home 80. So I was really, I did taxes because California
Right.
still, right? So that was a little,
Yeah.
not 80, but I close. I
Far from 80.
Far from 80 in California. Yes. Some states different, some not. But I
Yeah,
then
yeah.
did the math. I said, how much money do I need to make a day? And I really simplified it out. And I said, all right. So I remember I would do like fitness modeling shoots, or I would PA on a film set like I did in college. And I'm like, great, there's my $500 a day. And I kept looking at
Yep.
things like, how much can I build to that? And I recognized that there's so many pathways to get to what that is, or even just like, we all underestimate our skill set. Like consulting is huge.
Sure.
Someone is,
Sure.
I mean, social media is quite literally people watch other people talk about their general lives. Why? Because they're an expert in
Right.
what they know. Everyone's an expert. So
Right.
lean into what that part
Sure.
is. It is, but it's being curious. It's understanding that, like, okay, some people need that kind of format and that perceived safety net, but
Yeah.
it's not the only way to go through life. And I hope more people understand that and empower themselves to build a business, or at least try it, or start it as a side hustle and get the family involved. I don't know.
Sure.
Like, there's angles to take.
Sure. Yep. Yep. Get creative. Curiosity and creativity to me are huge. What are some of your health and wellness habits that you just like swear by, right? That you just are a part of your, right? What are some of those, whether it's, cold plunges or get me inside of what that is for you.
Yeah, I mean, you called it the
I'm dying.
Contrast therapy is great. If you don't have to have a cold plunge in your home, they're very expensive. I will say, big bucket of water. This is again on one of those days when the voices in your head are really loud and you've already done the 3 minutes and they keep coming back up. Big bucket, big bowl, ice water. Stick your face in it. Stick your face in it for 5 seconds.
Nice.
It will. When I tell
Nice.
you, it's like Listerine for the brain. It is. It's confronting and it's funny, and you'll start laughing and everybody watching you will laugh. So it also
Sure.
breaks up some of that tension. I'm a big believer, obviously, in movement, strength training,
Yep.
finding what works
Yep.
for you though. Like if it's going for a 2 hour
Yeah.
walk or an hour walk or doing the daily route, do that. I think morning rituals in terms of wellness, obviously the gratitude journal, some type of spiritual practice if you have one is always helpful to have, especially at the beginning of the day to
Yep.
set the primer. And then for me, sleep. I am,
Oh, amen.
oh, I hit 30 and the way that I turned into, I
Yeah.
need earplugs, I need an eye mask, I need a fan, I need a cooling blanket. I'm like a toddler who needs a pack and play to travel because
That's
like
awesome.
I have a whole set of
Yeah.
accoutrements, but it's those little things. It's those little habits that
Yeah.
also, and the one I recently added, before we go to bed, we have these red lights, our Amazon light bulbs in the bedroom. We put them to dim and to red because red light actually helps stimulate melatonin production in the body. It cues the body to calm down. Red seems very aggressive, and trust me, I thought so until I tried it. And I'm like, oh, it's kind of like a soft sunsetty vibe. It feels very comforting. So I'll read a
Right.
little bit
Right.
and get everything set and ready to go. But yeah, prioritizing sleep, prioritizing as, getting as much protein as I can throughout the day. And the mental work with the gratitude journaling and with, the spiritual practice is just game changing.
Yeah. Game changing. Way to go, girl. I like the tie in there. That was
Always.
well landed. Is there anything else that you can drop a little like bone of, relative to the tomorrows for Kendall? Is there
Yes.
is there anything without violating and or impacting any deal points?
Contractual structures. Yes. Okay.
You're
So
right.
I can just really stress the importance of following NKO Club on social media, signing up for the newsletter. It's absolutely free. I put workouts in there. I put recipes that are delicious. Great little links, hacks, perspectives on things. It's a great little community piece. Those come out every
Yeah.
Friday. And then that will lead into this new live stream network that is a bit of a bone. No one really knows about that yet. So that will be in January.
Let's go.
Yeah, and then that
Thanks
will
for
turn
that,
into
girl.
the thing. So the more you're
cool.
engaged with NKO Club now, the more you're going to have access to drops we do for merch, to be the first on the list, to I don't know, maybe beta test something. Who knows? So
Ooh, all right, cool. That's enough of a reason right there. Well, good. Well, we end with rapid fire, so I'm going to hit you with a couple quick ones, all right?
go.
You ready?
yep,
You ready, girl?
let's do it.
Best advice you've ever received?
They can knock you down. They can never knock you out.
Let's go. One thing on your bucket list.
Morocco. I really would love to go and just explore Morocco.
Cool. Yeah, yeah. When you feel overwhelmed and unfocused, what do you do?
I move. I move, and even if movement is just putting on a playlist and dancing around, or like throwing some punches in the air and shadow boxing, I have to move to get through it.
Yeah, love it. Is there anything that you're reading or watching or listening to right now that has just been kind of a game changer for you? You've really enjoyed it, that's sort of in your world right now that you can share?
Absolutely. I really love The Creative Act, which is the book by Rick Rubin. It's all about creative perspectives. It's all about really enjoying the process. It's a quick read. You can read it chapter by chapter, but there are so many nuggets in that book that just, the best way I can describe it is like an exhale when you feel overwhelmed by producing content. It's a great restructure, reframe to understand the beauty of the process and our own humanity in it.
Cool. Cool. Love it. So the show's called Game Changers. What or who is a game changer that has inspired you, and why?
Oh man. There is such a laundry list of incredible, I'm about to say incredible women. There are men who've also inspired me, but I always go back to women who've really just changed the game. I would say top of head, probably a woman like Emma Grede, watching these incredible female entrepreneurs who can go in, build these incredible businesses, and then also start angel investment funds to help others in the process. Early stage building a CPG food product that is very beginnings. We are in our infancy right now, and we're going to be very close to raising capital starting in January. And I've spent a lot of time talking to other female founders, and I'm just so impressed by not only the network and the community, but the energy behind these individuals who really stand on wanting to make the world better. And I admire these women so much. So there's a laundry list of them, but off the top of my head, I'd say Emma Grede. She's done it time and time again. She just hits a winner every time. I don't know how she does it, but she does.
Yeah, that is awesome. I love that, and I mean, your dad obviously, no question, is the dude, right? And then everybody else is just a laundry list of incredible chicks.
Oh my gosh,
Makes sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, we can add my brother in there, and my dog Bowie, and my incredible boyfriend
There
Alex.
You go, right?
But yeah, no, there's some good men too, but I have to say,
I'm kidding,
lucky to have all the women
100%.
that I got. They're a special,
Yeah.
special group.
Yeah. Well, NKO Club, let's do this. This is so exciting. I'm grateful for your vulnerability and ability to step out and do such hard work and share it with others in service of helping them be just a little bit better. Kendall Toole, this was super fun. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much, Molly. This is amazing. I appreciate it.